Chapter 1. Adrenaline spiked in Nolan's system. He took a deep breath, and then another, as he slipped through the forest under the cover of a moonless winter night. Careful to exhale in a slow, thin stream, he avoided making a puff of frozen mist anyone lurking nearby might spot. The barely audible snap of an occasional twig from his left was the only hint that Solo was doing the same, not too far away. The woman was stealthy as fuck. "That's it. Everyone steady. Careful now." Jordan, their boss, sounded as if they were going for a stroll in the park instead of crawling through enemy territory. The earpiece Nolan wore was his lifeline to the outside, to a place where everything was safe and bright and sane. His tenuous connection to a world he hoped to return to if he didn't get himself killed during this mission. At least until the next time he had to descend into some special hell. After all, this was his job. Kicking ass and making things right. Fighting for people who weren't able to do it for themselves. The goals of the security team he worked for, the Shields, were always aligned with due north on his moral compass, even if the methods they used to eliminate targets weren't always entirely legal. Nolan deepened his crouch, aware that not even his obsidian cargo pants and turtleneck, made of a heat signature dimming material, would be enough to obscure his bulky form if one of the soldiers who worked for the sex trafficking ring they were about to invade got curious and looked a little too closely in their direction. "I'm in place. Have a visual on the primary target." Arav, their sniper, clocked in precisely on time. The man was practically a robot, unflappable, which encouraged Nolan to try to rile him incessantly while they were hanging out at headquarters. Of course, the only person who really had a chance at ruffling him, and probably not even she could while they were engaged in business, was Sola, though she didn't seem to realize it. Behind the scope of his rifle, Arav was a machine, and when it came to looking after Sola's fine ass, he'd be twice as diligent, even for him. The trackers show Sola and Nolan approaching from the south, right on course. James, their newest addition, a completely adorable former construction worker who'd always aspired to be a superhero's sidekick, coordinated their efforts from the Shield's headquarters. He hadn't much enjoyed his single foray into fieldwork a couple months ago, but the guy was a legend when it came to keeping them in line from the office. Doubly so tonight. Considering how important this particular assignment was to him, James was on top of his game. His voice was calm and matter-of-fact in Nolan's ear, helping to keep him focused. He said, "JRAD is standing by to cut the power, scheduled for 253 seconds from now. Let me know if anyone needs more time." "I'm good," Arav answered for all of them. Nolan and Sola would only break radio silence if something was wrong. Same went for Ransom and Levi, who were mirroring their approach from the other side of the Better Days building that used to be some sort of canning facility in the way back. It had been converted into a seedy hideout where women, and apparently underage men as well, were bought, sold, and used. Nolan thought again of the particular victim they were attempting to find a trace of, Laurel, James's long-lost sister. They'd gotten a tip that she'd been kept in this hellhole once, though he figured that was a pretty way of saying tortured. Unfortunately, it had been years since any of their leads, who'd been freed with the Shield's help after a similar raid they'd done not too long ago, had seen her. Someone here would know something to carry them up the next step in the chain. They were closing in on answers. He could feel it. And until they had them, he'd be happy to put an end to the sick bastards who continued to abuse those who couldn't fend for themselves. Nolan desperately hoped, for James's sake, that they got some closure. He'd be lying if he said his own curiosity wasn't piqued too. Questions had been clawing at him from the moment he'd seen the artist's renderings of what Laurel could look like today. Maybe it was because he had a very beautiful face, to put with the unspeakable crimes. Or possibly, knowing she was James's sister made her easier to relate to than some of the other victims they'd rescued. Either way, her portrait had struck such a chord with him. He hadn't been able to get those haunted eyes out of his mind for months. "I've got the entrance locked down." Marcus had reached his post at the main gate. He'd keep anyone from coming in to provide backup or slipping away from the justice they were about to deliver. Kennedy, their medic, was with him, far enough from the main action to be protected, but nearby so she could get to the operatives in the thick of things in a hurry in case things went sideways. Marcus seemed nearly as rabid about watching her ass during ops as Arav was about Sola. When Nolan reached the edge of the clearing, he glanced over at her. She flashed him a hand signal for ready, which he echoed. Their body cams sent the data to James, who rallied the team. "Ransom, Levi, Sola, and Nolan are all in place. Arav is set. Marcus and Kennedy are on standby. J-Rad is on final countdown. 29, 28, 27. Jordan came over the intercom next, giving orders that set their intricate plan in motion. It took months of planning, but came down to moments of action if they did their jobs right. They were a precision instrument, working together in what was about to become a cloud of chaos. The next several heartbeats could change Nolan's life forever. Silence from their objectionless teammates was as good as a green light. James gave them one last boost. "Good luck, everyone." J-Rad, an honorary shield, a geek turned dom who worked for an elite police squad called the Men in Blue, and did, well, this, with them as a side hustle on occasion, gave the final count. 3, 2, 1. Everything went black. The forest erupted into motion and violence, dragging Nolan into its inky depths. He sucked in a lungful of air, as if preparing to free dive, then entered the mix with Sola, who set the pace for their spear of the overall attack. Music cut off from inside the building, and time appeared to distort, going slow and fast all at once. His comms picked up a few dull thuds that he recognized as silenced shots. "The exterior guards are down except for one runner who was grazed. Marcus, he's heading straight your way. Sola, Nolan, Ransom, and Levi have crossed the clearing and are about to enter through the ground floor windows." James gave a play-by-play so they were all up to date and didn't accidentally take out one of their own as they made split-second, life-and-death decisions. Arav grunted. "Inside, they're slow, but moving, herding most of the victims toward the basement, except for those occupied upstairs." If Nolan's boot bashed through the window a bit harder than necessary, he figured no one would notice or care. His blood boiled as he tucked and rolled, popping up with his weapon drawn. It didn't take long before he'd eliminated 3 of the fuckwads hurting the young women he saw scurrying towards safety behind couches. He wondered how often they'd faced violence, that they had learned to huddle together and keep low as they sought shelter. That thought alone made it easy to pull the trigger when he needed to. Beside him, Sola was doing her part just as fluidly, until there was no one left to take out in the vicinity. He swept through the main area, then flipped around to face it, as Sola began to climb up to the second floor. As they moved back to back up the stairs, a shot took a chunk out of the wall beside his shoulder. Oops, guess there was someone left down there after all. Nolan could have sworn he felt a breeze on his neck, right before the head of the guy pointing his gun at him exploded like a ripe watermelon. Damage most likely due to a large caliber shell. "Thanks, Arav." "You're welcome." They both knew if that asshole had felled Nolan, Sola would have been next. Unfazed, she jetted down the hallway, kicking in doors and using zip ties to restrain the monsters they found inside each room. while Nolan covered her and took out a few more of the dudes who tried to stop them with bullets, instead of those who could only cower, seeing as they were equipped with bare asses. Those guys they tied up and piled in one room for someone else to sort out later. If the patrons thought they'd been engaging in independent, consensual sex work, well, that wasn't something they took issue with. But anyone who saw these women and, fuck it, kids, should realize that wasn't what was going on here. The shields coordinated seamlessly, like one single righteous weapon, and before things had barely begun, they were over. "Our section is clear. That's everyone cleaned from the top floor," Sola reported. "Us too," Levi confirmed. "The basement is now varmint-free." "Same at the front. No one in, no one out." Marcus wasn't usually a man of many words, but on ops, even less so. "The cellar door is still barred from the outside. No one else made it past the indoors crew," Arav reported. With the immediate threat eliminated, and Marcus's eyes on the access road to make sure no reinforcements showed up, their attention turned toward the more important part of their mission, making sure the victims were safe and well taken care of. Ransom called for the medic. "Kennedy, we could use you in here. Brace yourself. I wish I could kill these fuckers again." Nolan hung back, letting Sola approach the freaked-out survivors in their area. "Hey, you're okay now. We're not going to hurt you. We want to help you. Get you somewhere safe, where you'll never have to do this again. Assuming you don't want to, and certainly never under these conditions." She waved toward the dirty mattress in one of the rooms. He discreetly scanned every woman, man, and child, angling his chest so that he fed their images back to the Shield's headquarters for their records. None of them were the woman he was looking for. Now that the critical moments had passed, James's voice was a lot less sure and somewhat vulnerable when he asked, "Does anyone see my sister?" "Negative," Ransom replied. "Not me." Arav sounded like he hated to confirm it. Sola called Laurel's name as she checked a clump of women who'd hid in a bathroom. When she emerged, she shook her head. Nolan cursed, then tapped his comms, hating to deliver the crushing blow to his friend. "I'm sorry, James. Laurel isn't here." A whoosh of air was followed by several long seconds of silence. "Okay, I guess that's good, right? Because we knew it was a long shot." James couldn't quite disguise the disappointment in his voice. "Don't give up." Jordan, the owner of SHIELD Security Services and their undisputed leader, probably had settled his hand on James's shoulder at their command post in the mountain mansion Jordan lived in with his husband and wife, which used to serve as their temporary headquarters. Now that they were growing, James had taken on one final construction project, overseeing the erection of a multi-story building that would include planning space, an armory, a gym, and adjoined apartments for their agents in Middletown. It would probably be less plush, but way more convenient in the long run. Besides, they were more like a family than coworkers, and staying together would only cement the bonds that helped them excel under intense conditions like these. "None of us will stop, James. Not until we find her or information about what happened to her, at least." Nolan grimaced. He knew what Jordan was really saying. They wouldn't give up until they'd found Laurel or discovered where someone had hid her body and put them in the ground for it. He thought again of the artist's rendering of the woman Laurel would likely be today. High cheekbones, melancholy yet proud eyes, and a strong chin that erased any misplaced sense of her delicacy. He'd long ago learned to trust his gut in this business, and his instincts were screaming that Laurel wasn't as far away as James might think. They just had to keep searching and helping as many other people like her in the process. "You looking for Laurel?" asked a pale woman, older than most, wrapped in a stained blanket. "Wavy brown hair, About this tall? Same age as me?" "Yeah." Nolan tried not to act too interested, lest he spook her. "Her family is hoping she's safe. They love her very much and want to know she's okay." "If that's true, what's her baby brother's name?" The woman stood a bit straighter, defiant despite her circumstances. James gasped on the other side of the comms. Nolan grinned, thinking of James as a baby anything. He was cute as hell, but a full-grown man. "James. His name is James." The woman blinked, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. "Haven't seen Laurel in close to 10 years, but last I knew, she was working at Heels outside of town, earning her way out from under Draven. No one ever makes it. She knew that, but she said she had to try." "The strip club?" Not that Nolan had ever been to that particular establishment, but their briefing for the op had included it, since it was part of Draven's network, and one where shady shit happened. "Yeah, once the women here age out." She shuddered. "Anyway, if they're pretty enough and haven't been broken, sometimes they graduate to the club. Draven says he'll give them a job so they can pay off their debt to him and go free. He skims most off the top, charges them for costumes, makeup, a place to stay, food, all that. It's a waste of time, and most either end up here again or give up. I don't know what happened to Laurel, but she never came back. I knew she wouldn't, one way or another." "We can work with that. That's great information. Thank you." Nolan's arms ached to hug their informant, but he was afraid she wouldn't derive any comfort from the touch of a stranger, so he simply nodded instead. "If you go with Sola, she'll make sure you're safe, have clean clothes, warm food, and transition you to our friends from a shelter that's equipped to set you up for success in whatever it is you want to do next. This nightmare is over for tonight and forever. No buyouts, no bullshit. Okay?" "Who are you?" the woman asked, more tears streaming down her face. "Who would just let us go? Help us after all this time?" "We're the Shields." Nolan smiled at her, nodded, then pivoted on his heel, not wanting to waste a moment. Once Draven got word of what they'd done here, who knew what he'd do next to protect what was left of his empire? "Boss, I'm going to go check out that club." Nolan hated the thought of returning empty-handed, seeing James, who'd come to be a friend in addition to a coworker over the past few months. Heartbroken, even if he had a sexy husband and wife to console him properly. "Now, on your own?" Sola raised a brow at him. "These women will trust you a hell of a lot more than me, and a single guy will draw less attention at Heels." Nolan shrugged. "Kennedy is going to have the bulk of the work now. Help her convince these people to go to the safe house James arranged until Tom's organization can bridge the gap. Arav will be happy to fill in as your partner in case you need someone to step and fetch. Won't you, buddy?" "I'll be down in 2 minutes." Arav had probably already meticulously cleaned and packed his weapon, which he babied. "See?" Nolan grinned. "I'll catch up." "You always get the fun jobs." Sola mock-bitched, but didn't try to stop him. Around Shields, everyone could hold their own, even in sticky situations. "Going to a strip club is your idea of a good time?" Nolan couldn't help a little teasing of his own. "Maybe you should take Arav out for a lap dance later to loosen him up." "Don't involve me," the sniper deadpanned. "I could shoot you a new asshole from here." Wow, something other than strictly business from Arav. That's how Nolan knew that despite his feigned indifference, Arav wasn't exactly impartial when it came to Sola. She rolled her eyes, then refocused on the job at hand, ushering the victims of the shit sacks they'd just ended to a sanctuary where they could recover Then, once they were ready, move on with the rest of their lives. One of Jordan's mega-rich benefactors, Archer something or other, had bankrolled Tom's shelter, ensuring they had the resources they needed to help these people start fresh and hopefully, someday, be happy. Like James, Nolan and the rest of the Shields wanted so badly for Laurel to have the same opportunity, even if she had no idea they existed. He hoped they weren't years too late.
You can listen to the rest of the book in the Tempt Romance audiobooks app, available on the App Store and Google Play. The link to the book is in the description. Discover even more bestsellers and exclusive stories updated weekly, only in Tempt Romance audiobooks.